Welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover the bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have the time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's National League's Dan Harrow. I'm American League's Warren Sprague. And Dan, some of Major League Baseball's lovable losers have invested some big money into some of their more exciting pieces. Jackson Chourio of the Brewers collected a historic 8-year, $82 million payday before he even made his major league debut. The Pittsburgh Pirates recently extended their arguable ace Mitch Keller on a 5-year, $77 million deal, and even the Colorado Rockies stepped beyond the norm and extended the young and exciting shortstop Ezekiel Tovar on a minimum 7-year, $63.5 million contract just 3 short days ago. Do you agree with these decisions from the perspective of their respective camps? Do any of them signal a new era of effort and expectations of contendership for their long-starved fan bases?
Well, it's certainly a new era, Warren. It seems like these teams are kind of rolling the dice, in my opinion, on a lot of these players. Surely these are guys that they've drafted and developed and they've been working with for a few years. They have a lot of tape on them, probably seen them go through at least a couple minor leagues, hopefully single A at a minimum. So by signing them early, you could probably pay them a lot less per year. Still a pretty large amount for someone that hasn't debuted in the majors, but you could pay them a lot less because you haven't given them a chance to get there and show what they can do. It's all based off projections. It's a guarantee for the player, which they'll probably take, a long-term contract with guaranteed money, because there's a chance that they might get hurt or they might not play up to that potential, and at least the money is there. The downside to it, of course, is the inverse, which if the player gets there and doesn't perform well, that team is kind of locked in overpaying them. But if that player kind of explodes, the team is saving a ton of money. And, you can make the argument that the player is not incentivized to really do any better than the value of his contract. But the fact is, these are baseball players. They're going to do the best they can. So hopefully, if all these players just turn out to be what they're supposed to be, what they're expected to become, these teams will be saving money in the long term. And if you think about it, a lot of these high draft picks and prospects that these lower cap teams in these, lower viewership and just money spent cities, a lot of the players that they end up having, they often end up leaving after their rookie deal. They don't necessarily stay with the team because they just don't have enough of a competitive roster. Part of that reason is because the team invested in that single player so much. So maybe this will help them keep some of these players and give other players reason to re-sign with the team or come join the team rather than having them just leave, or like we've seen the Pirates do in so many years, just trade talent because they know when time comes, they can't match an offer that the Yankees or the Dodgers or whoever can play. So this might actually be a way for a lot of these teams to lock in this talent and definitely, like you mentioned, make them more competitive in the long term. So have to mention that there have been situations where this backfires. The Wander Franco situation was a long-term contract. That's on the books now for the Rays. They have to eat that. So you have to do a cost-risk analysis and really decide if it's good enough for you. But I love that teams are taking this chance. I think it's really exciting. And you know what, Warren, we've already seen Jackson Chourio in one game. I think he's a real deal. So what do you think?
A lot of real deal Jacksons in the league this year, man. You've got Jackson Chourio, you've got Jackson Merrill we'll talk about in a minute, and we're waiting for Jackson Holiday to get called up in Baltimore. I think I'm going to start scouring those depth charts to find 2 more Jacksons so that the Jackson 5 can run roughshod over Major League Baseball in 2024, my friend.
I love it.
But guys, in all seriousness, it's super exciting to see some of these teams investing a little bit because now we get to decide or maybe expect to see a change in culture, perhaps, right? You look at those Royals investing a ton of money into a lot of their roster, most especially, of course, Bobby Witt Jr. Like, there's a lovable loser who, as we've already established, we're crossing our fingers they go on to have a good year. But now we wonder if maybe we look to the Rockies to extend maybe Nolan Jones as their next big move to say, no, wait, we are not going to just lay down anymore. Or maybe Pittsburgh makes a big offer to O'Neill Cruz. These are steps we're wondering will come next to really show where their mindsets are as franchises. I would expect that these Brewers aren't stepping backwards because, well, they certainly just won a pretty tightly contested game against your Mets to open their season. And by the way, guys, it's opening weekend! Yeah!
Finally, we're here.
Yeah!
We did it. We made it.
We finally have real, tangible, actual baseball that matters to talk about today, and we are so excited, despite both the Mets and Mariners starting off on what we would say is definitely a misplaced foot, but I know we're not losing faith. Let's start talking about everything that's happened over the last week of baseball, because I think there's another big contract that you wanted to kind of emphasize earlier on in our conversation that I want to pay tribute to. Jordan Montgomery's finally off the board, and boy, what a team to go to. You said it in our chat before. If you can't beat him, sign him. Talk to me, Dan. Where's Jordan Montgomery playing?
Everybody thought he'd go to Texas or maybe Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery signed with Arizona, the team that he beat in the World Series last year. Wow.
God!
This
And
team, I don't even know, boy. I don't even know what to say. This is just, I don't even know. Best rotation in the National League?
Oh no! Is there a chance they're even better than the Dodgers? Is there a chance they're definitely up there with San Francisco and San Diego? This division just got even more exciting. But I mean, if we all caught what happened yesterday for the Arizona Diamondbacks, you know that they may not need one of the finest rotations in the National League or beyond to be an impact player a lot faster than we thought they'd be in winning that division, because they just whooped those Rockies 16-1 and set a brand new modern baseball era record with 14 runs scored in that second inning. Unbelievable. Or third, who cares? It was early enough in the game where it's like Rockies are their heads are spinning, those poor folks. So what a game. What a game to watch. It was so exciting to basically see what I typically try to do in MLB The Show in real life, where you just hit a blooper off of absolutely every single opportunity. They scored those 14 runs without a home run in that inning, man. I mean, how are we not all in awe of what Arizona did yesterday? Perfect place to start in my mind, at the peak of hype.
Absolutely. The Snakes are running it back, dude. I mean, we talked about in the offseason how they want to compete with the Dodgers. They believe that they can fight for that division crown and make noise in the postseason again. And they got a taste last year at the World Series, and nothing will satisfy them unless it's getting all the way back there. And bringing in a guy like Montgomery is the best way to do it. And Texas only had him for the second half of the year when they were really chasing Houston's tails. They got him for the full year, the Diamondbacks. So yeah, this is a huge impact for them. And then, like you mentioned, to see the bats string together the way that they did, all without a home run too, that is such a promising sign for the season. We should mention that it was against the Rockies. So,
right.
you know, it's not like they blew up Spencer Strider, but still, it doesn't matter. It's a high note. It's a good win. You know, the Dodgers and the Padres already have played a couple games, and they both won for opening day. So they're both 2-1 right now. So the D-backs are probably looking at it like they're already on the back foot. And I think they want to keep that chip on their shoulder for the rest of the year. They're not going to get a big head over this.
I agree with you. Yeah, they're really going to push their pedal to the metal, and there's no reason not to. They look fantastic and offensively ready to capitalize on the momentum they have. You know, I remember looking at the stats and the box score, curious about what my Eugenio Suarez export did for them last night, right? And I noticed the only player to not get a hit is the arguable MVP of that lineup, Corbin Carroll. He took 2 walks, scored 2 runs, but he didn't need to do much else. And that speaks volumes to the quality of the lineup that Arizona has on paper right at the moment. And speaking of Suarez, Seattle gambled that maybe his swing was exhausted, but that didn't stop him from batting in 2 RBI himself. So another reason why I'm bandwagoning all over Arizona this year. I'm still excited though for the outcome of that first game, and it'll be really, really compelling to see how hard that momentum sinks in for them. Despite a couple injuries, right? Injuries, injuries, injuries. You said it earlier in our conversations that an injury can change everything at the drop of a dime. And we are going to acknowledge a couple pretty key injuries that sunk some predictions that we put out there earlier on in our content. So let's go ahead and start looking at all those teams that look better or worse after already just one day of baseball. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and we should probably start with the Diamondbacks since we mentioned the Johnny Montgomery signing.
Yep.
So their big prospect, their number one ranked internal prospect, is Jordan Lawler. He was expected to probably make the team for opening day, but
Mm-hmm.
he did get hurt. He just got right thumb surgery, and he's going to be out for 2 months. And this was a guy who they really wanted to make a debut. We actually talked about him and how
Mm-hmm.
we were excited to see him because we expected him to make a similar impact to like Pena did with Houston. A
Uh-huh.
team that's already really good and taking advantage of the youth that they have. So they still will have an opportunity to do that if he gets healthy later on in the year. If anything, it's a little bit of injury insurance for them when he returns,
Mm-hmm.
and he should be an impact player. But in addition to that, we did see Paul Sewald and Eduardo Rodriguez hit the 15-day IL. Not something you want to see to start the
Uh,
season.
well, with the offense they've got, they're not going to be too worried about closing out tight games if they continue to play like this. So, of course, so many ifs go into every single day of baseball. We're not sitting here assuming that this hot start is going to translate to even other games against the Rockies, let alone other teams. So, if it does, though, this isn't going to be as tough a scenario as they could have faced. And for all the depth we talked up about certain camps, like say the Cincinnati Reds, like can we just kind of give a little golf clap to Arizona? Like I
Yeah.
love watching a team get better than they thought they'd be on the the standings listings, and then decide to just throw their money and their minds into making the best team that they can. I love that they're not wasting their time solidifying themselves as a contender despite all of the giants, no pun intended, around them. And
Mhm.
I'm very inspired by them, and I just kind of wish Seattle would take some notes, especially looking back at that 2022 year and how much they could have been this past season. But anyway, I'll make everything about the Mariners if I'm not careful. Let's move on to another team that faced some injury news right off the bat. The Brewers, who look good against y'all today, find some more injuries to concern them. Garrett Mitchell did get injured with a left hand fracture in his last spring training game, and that definitely weakens the team's outfielding and batting depth. You'll talk about maybe Wade Miley, right, with his left shoulder soreness. And of course, pitching's already, undergoing a handicap a bit without the amazing Brandon Woodruff to throw strikes on day one and Devin Williams to close out their games. So you might, I think, say their pressure's all on the bullpen. What are your thoughts on the pitching you saw the Mets have to wade through and eventually succumb to today in opening day?
Yeah, not much to wade through as far as my leagues are concerned. But
Hey,
all this just really hurts their depth. And Wandy Peralta started as our opening day. I think at this point it's Wandy Peralta and everybody else worrying because their day two starter is going to be DL Hall, who I think when we talked about the Brewers, we had him penciled in as like their fourth or fifth starter.
yeah, they're
Yeah,
fifth.
if not
Yeah,
their fifth starter. So Peralta did pretty good though. Like most pitchers, he was a little shaky for the first couple innings, and then he settled in pretty quick. Only gave up one hit. It was a home run from Starling Marte. Good to see Marte swinging the bat like that. But they got enough starting pitching out of him that their bullpen didn't fall apart and were able to keep the Mets quiet. The Mets probably are, the Mets. I already expressed that I don't have high expectations for them this year. I did expect them to win this kind of game in this kind of series, though. So
right.
for the Brewers, it's not something they can overcome clearly. But I will tell you that the Mets didn't pitch the best, and probably gave up some chances that the Brewers failed to take advantage of. So
Hmm.
I think it's still going to be a struggle for the Brewers. They really can't have any more injuries to their
Hmm.
starting pitching right now. Like, that's
Hmm.
it. I mean, they do not have anyone else behind. They're going to get to a point where it's going to be a couple bullpen days if they lose anybody else. And that it doesn't matter how many runs the offense scores, they'll just give up too many. So they're right on the precipice right now.
Well, Milwaukee's got to cross their fingers because what was their key strength last year is now certainly a weakness at this moment, despite what we talked about in the primer, if you recall, how much I still believed in Milwaukee pitching. And Wandy Peralta aside, you're right. There's a lot of Swiss cheese in that notion right at the moment, and they're going to have to hope there's no more holes to cover up. Now, while we're on the topic of the Mets, I suppose injury news has hit you all as well. And you walked into opening day confident, understandably. I remember you telling us, predicting that the Mets would get their first win of the season in game one. And for good reason, because they're one of they're actually history's finest team on opening day. Number two is the Mariners. We will both now
Yes.
weep our crocodile tears about how that jinxed us.
Yep.
Jinxed us for game one. Talk about the Mets, man. How you feeling? Even still, injuries are definitely a theme for you. Kodai Senga comes to mind, right?
Yeah, there was hope that he'd be back sometime, in the next couple weeks, but he's going to be shut down for the next month, dealing with his shoulder. The Mets are prepared for it. We have a pretty decent bullpen, but guys like David Peterson and Sean Reed Foley are hurt, so it thins us out a little bit more. We had Jose Quintana start an opening day, and
Mm-hmm.
he settled in pretty well. He did okay. He gave up a couple of hits, he gave up a solo home run, but he honestly did okay, as much as they probably would have expected him to do.
Sure.
The Mets are in a position now where, with our 1 through 5 starters, we're going to lose more games than we're going to win, honestly. It's potential to win more if when Senga comes back and if we get a little bit healthier overall. Uh, but the bats need to outperform the pitching if we're going to overcome the injuries we've already had. And just
Mm-hmm.
judging by the first day, we have not seen that. But I've seen a couple things from spring training that I'm hoping the Mets will start implementing as far as game plan and using pitchers in a different way. We have a rookie manager. This is his first year actually as the manager, and hopefully he'll handle things. Our last couple managers were veterans. We had Buck Showalter, Taylor Collins. Wasn't
Mm-hmm.
crazy about some of the decisions they made. So I was already happy to see, like, we were losing 3-1, and in the ninth they didn't send Diaz out because they don't want to waste him. They might need him tomorrow, and that's the kind of thing that
Uh-huh.
Buck Showalter would have been like, nope, it's his day to pitch. He's pitching. I don't care what the score is. So I'm happy to see things like that from Carlos Mendoza, the manager, already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. As you should be. Getting an idea of what kind of decisions are going to be made from that new mind at the helm is kind of important. Goodness knows if I saw Scott Service leave Seattle and a new general manager come in, I'd be really banking on every single decision he makes and deciding for myself whether I'm going to like this guy for the next X amount of years, right? So enjoy the process, I guess, feeling it out. Now, speaking of feeling it out, your recent signee that we didn't get to talk about in the primer, JD Martinez, is on this team. And as compelling of a designated hitter as he can be moving forward into the season, you had to be just a little bummed that overall it was pitch selection in today's first game against the Brewers that felt like the Mets were just rushing through. Just a little bit. Maybe the wind was keeping them from feeling super invested and taking good swings, but we saw Alonso pop out maybe once or twice, right? And we saw some key notes in that lineup really, well, take swings and misses all over the place. So talk to me a little bit how you feel with that JD Martinez addition. How long before you hope that pays dividends?
Yeah, so JD got signed so late, he's kind of ramping up in AAA, and he's not with the Mets yet, but they're probably going to call him up within the next couple of weeks. The expectation is he comes and he's that impact DH that the Mets have never had before. So
Mm,
there is kind of a lot on his shoulders. He's a vet. He knows how to get hits, and that's what they need. They have a lot of youth on the team that is still going to be working through that in their second and third year coming up. Um, until JD joins the team, there's kind of a hole at DH. We have DJ Stewart in there right now, and
Mm-hmm.
it proved today that you mentioned pitch selection. Guys were just swinging, and we had a lot of balls on the edge of the box. And first day, people need to settle into routines, but it did seem like I wouldn't say the wind was as much of a factor. It certainly was for the defensive side, which we saw a few good grabs today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Churiel was everywhere.
yeah, honestly, he was impact all over the place. A couple loose plays on the infield. We saw an interesting play at second base that caused the benches to clear, and an almost a challenge and an almost overturn, but ended up being called safe.
Ooh,
Play at
yeah.
first base. Yeah, a few things up in the air out there today. So a few of those weird opening day jitters. I still have high expectations that everybody will settle in because I'm not singing just the wild swinging like we've seen from guys like Nimmo last year and Alonso the last couple. Is a little bit more discipline, a couple walks in there, and hopefully they kind of get it together in time for Martinez to come up and be impactful.
Sure, it's game one, and you'd expect him to come up and be a bit of a spark plug when that happens. So maybe they're just, getting loose, getting primed for a long marathon. As I know all of us fans who come out on the losing end in game one need to patiently remind ourselves of that this is a marathon, certainly not a sprint. It's the longest major sport in American sports. So, take a deep breath, buckle up, and try to enjoy the ride. Now, speaking of rides, one of the games yesterday that really represented an incredible ride was watching the defending champion Texas Rangers hoist their banner and then go toe to toe with the Craig Counsell led Cubs. What a fun opening series for those two teams to engage in. But man, oh man, did my prediction that the Cubs would be the team to come out of the NL Central at the end of the season take a big hit theoretically as we see Justin Steele go down with a regrettable injury right off the bat. A hamstring sprain that is estimated to take about 6 to 18 weeks, depending on who you are, to recover from. We gotta just say it. This is a huge hit to the Cubs' prospects moving forward in this season.
Yeah, not what they needed in a year when they kind of need everything to go right to lock down that division crown. They made some of the signings the fans were clamoring for in the offseason, but Steele should have been the ace of this team. And now he's down. They lost Marcus Stroman. Not as strong a staff as what they need to win that division.
Mm-hmm. And they're already up against it and looking to climb a bit of a mountain. And then Texas adds insult to injury and pulls out that win after all in extra innings. And one of the better games of opening day. But those Cubs, just like those Brewers, I mean, it's a division. Remember, it's a division where it's really gonna be hard to tell who wins unless those Reds keep doing what they did. But we won't necessarily, digress over there. Oh well, the Buccos won too, actually. Come to think of it, but we'll get there. Another team that saw some injury hits and my predictions take a hit were those Minnesota Twins, where Royce Lewis, my ill-fated attempt to give good juju to, right? I said he'd be my batting champion. Nah, man, it's not going to solve the injury-prone atmosphere around this guy's depth chart. As Royce Lewis sadly gets hobbled while he rounds second base, we see that his quadricep get blown out, and bummer. I'm bummed because I want Royce Lewis to do well. He hits a beautiful leadoff homer, right? Puts the Royals right on their heels, and you get a really cool dogfight there in the early innings. Just to see that happen for Royce is like, okay, cool. I'm reminded already why you don't predict so boldly, so confidently, so quickly into the Major League Baseball season. So how do you feel for me, man? I'm a little brokenhearted without Royce.
I gotta say, dude, I told you injuries in this team. It's this horrible relationship. We talked about it. I don't know what it is. This team just gets injured, and yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Luckily, it's hopefully not super serious, and he will be back. But this Twins team is supposed to live off their offense, and the offense kind of saved them. Stratton kind of blew the game for the Royals. I think they
Mm-hmm.
were relatively in it. The rest of the offense for the Royals did not look strong enough to really challenge the Twins. But yeah, this is a blow for them. It's not too much they can't overcome, but
Mm-hmm.
it's to start the year like this. Yikes! Bad start.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've put a blurb into our notes about Max Kepler. Am I missing news about what's happening to, well, a piece that Seattle would have liked to pick up over the offseason given the right circumstances?
Yeah, so Kepler did exit the game. If you give me 1 second, I will grab it right here. So yeah, Kepler exited the game with soreness in his right leg. He got an X-ray. X-ray came back negative, so he's day to day. But they will probably give him a couple of days. He must have twisted something out in right field in his right leg, though. So if he is out of the lineup, that's just one more bat missing for them. And Kepler didn't record a hit yesterday, so maybe they could slide someone else in that can. But it's not a good start for a team that's had these issues every year.
Don't mind me, Dan. Excuse me in the corner. For those who are not watching on YouTube, I'm praying just a little bit that it's not Buxton or Correa next, because I root for the Twins in my heart from an experience I enjoyed watching them play live at Target Field all these years ago. So I would like to see them, well, rebound and be competitive in a division that looks to be competitive with 4 of these 5 teams really seeming poised. Now, that's not to say Crochet, the pitcher who debuted for the White Sox yesterday, looked great against the Tigers in a close pitchers duel. More details on that a little later, because I know we've got some notes on those Tigers, who were almost my pick in the American League Central. However, the one I did end up picking had a great day, and another rookie manager in Stephen Voigt. But again, I'm so good at sampling. What else we took away, we'll talk about later on in the show. The Yankees are up, man. The Yankees and their injuries, right? Now, some of these are a little minor, but some of them a little more major. Garrett Cole will miss at least 2 months, it would seem. He's on the 60-day IL, and that's huge for New York and sinking a lot of expectations in this team around the league. But they pulled out a gutsy win against the Astros. We'll debate in a little bit on whose fault that was, really. But beyond that, DJ and Peraza are both on the 10-day IL for these Yankees, but they also underwent an immediate change going into the season with a huge 3-team trade that saw John Berti come over from the Miami Marlins. Tell me what you're thinking about where the Yankees stand with all this taken into consideration.
I think the Yankees pretty accurately saw that with these injuries that they've had, especially to Garrett Cole, that they needed to get somebody to help keep themselves in the race. The division is not taking a step back. You know that firsthand, Warren. So they are they are going to try and stay competitive, and I commend them for that. I expected teams. We talked about teams like Houston and a couple other teams out there to do things to make a move right before opening day, and we saw Arizona do it. We saw the Yankees do it. So it's definitely going to be impactful for them. They got a gutsy win, I think, against the Astros. And if they're good enough to do that with guys like Peraza and LeMahieu out, that's exactly what you need to see. So this team is still going to be dangerous. They are, I will say, injuries are starting to pile up. We got multiple at multiple positions, and they certainly need to keep it clean for a few weeks, give those guys a chance to come back and not call up anybody too early. But it's a good start for the Yankees.
It is, yeah. A gutsy win, a compelling one of the better games of that opening day, I say again. I just like baseball, so a lot of these games were pretty good games on opening day. But though we'll have to see how much the Garrett Cole injury impacts this team longer term into the season. And if they could beat the Astros, though, they could probably beat a lot of teams, even if the Astros, as we'll discuss a little later, definitely look a little bit to be trending downwards compared to what everybody might expect of them, including us, really, because we know this is typically a playoff team and then some. But one last team riddled with injuries that we really want to swing through for our opening day breakdown is those Cardinals that you had coming out of the National League Central as winners by the end of this season. Well, I'm bummed to know one of my favorite players for that camp, Lars Nootbaar, finds himself battling rib injuries. We all have Dylan Carlson, who is a very exciting young player for them, battled shoulder injuries. And of course, the 10-day IL is still where we see Tommy Edman reside. And we know that team or that player gives a lot of flexibility to their lineup, both offensively and defensively. And they really didn't look all that compelling, getting absolutely drubbed by the Los Angeles Dodgers, which is to be expected to some extent, but still, a 7-1 loss to them. How do you feel about where the Cards stand with all that taken into consideration and that tough Game 1 loss in LA?
Yeah, those are significant injuries to two center fielders that they ended up starting Victor Scott II, a rookie who went 0 for 3 at the plate with a strikeout. So
Mm-hmm.
that hurts. And then they ended up putting the younger Win at shortstop because of the Edmund injury, and he also went 0 for 3. So you have all of a sudden the back of the lineup for the Cardinals because of these injuries are these kids are calling up from AAA and rookies, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the impact. Now it's the Dodgers. Glasnow looked a lot better, and they probably were not going to win this game either. But they only managed 1 run and 3 hits. That's just not good enough. And that's upsetting for me. Like you mentioned, I picked this team to kind of storm back this year, and it's not looking that great to start off. It's just a game, and we're going to say that, I guess, for every game, but it's
Every
just the first
single
game.
one.
Every
Yep.
game. Let's remember, guys, it's just the first game.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's disappointing to see their depth already tested like this. Not the
Mm-hmm.
way you want some of these rookies to be making their debuts. It's a lot more pressure on them, and it might change how they will be holding the bat when they come up. So, yeah, not an ideal debut for some of these guys, not an ideal start for the Cardinals. They need to rise above these injuries because there's no one else they can bring up or call on to get better. They need to rise above it. And this is really NL Central's really quickly looking like whichever team is going to be the least injured is going to stand the best chance by the end of the year.
And you know what? Let's just call a spade a spade. That's probably the thing that we can celebrate the most about baseball is that injuries make the difference every year. And as a fan who, when he plays MLB The Show, he prays that he turns down injuries enough so that they don't play that much of a factor. I'm going to be reminded that in real life, you can't play God like that. And there's going to be hiccups that are impossible to project all around these various camps. What's sad to me is that certain teams like Minnesota, for example, just seem to magnetically attract them. And as I continue to talk baseball with you over these years, I wonder if we'll ever find some sort of, I don't know, cosmic pothole that certain teams like fall into so that we can maybe start to justify. Maybe it's the grass in Minnesota. I don't know. Like, I want to find the reason why these patterns exist. But at least in the case of Royce Lewis and some of the other injuries around town, it's just bad luck. Well, tough luck to those teams who are facing those obstacles so early in the season. But let's focus now on what we can celebrate about opening day, because oh man, sitting on the couch for the first day of the year, putting MLB TV on and choosing the big inning as my means of seeing highlight after highlight of games all around the league, some of which I'm not allowed to take in typically because of blackout circumstances. Like, I was just so grateful. I felt so blessed getting to stick my nose into all these awesome matchups, and many of them were some pretty cool games. Any one before we move on to our maybe surprises from opening day? Any one game stand out to you, Dan, as one that you were really grateful to get to take in?
Well, taking out of consideration my own team since we got rained out on opening day.
What a
Um,
bad omen. I was so
yeah,
heartbroken for you.
Yeah, I was excited for Toronto and Tampa because both of those teams look a little
Mm.
bit different than they did last year,
Mhm.
and it looked like it was going to be a pitching duel. Zach
Mhm.
Eflin is a guy that I saw a lot of in Philadelphia, so I was expecting a little
Mhm.
bit better from him. He got beat up a little bit, and yeah,
Mhm.
we got to see that Blue Jays offense do what we said they need to do if they want to compete, and they did it. And on the other side, we saw the Rays really not look nearly as good as they did last year. And we talked about how we thought they'd struggle, but we also saw a lot of pundits kind of act like no, they're going to be fine, and
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
look fine, Warren.
No, they didn't. And I love how Tampa's earned the respect of these writers all across the league who just one by one kept basically saying, yeah, they look worse, but they're the Rays, so shrug playoffs, right?
Yeah,
Like,
literally.
and hey, I'm really glad. I mean, this team's never won a World Series or anything, right? And for decades, were pretty lovable losers themselves. So I'm glad that the reputation has turned around for them. But like, can the Mariners get some respect for a second? Sorry, I said I would make everything about Seattle if I'm not careful. And in this case, I just didn't understand why writers are so, well, confident that Tampa's going to churn out, if nothing else, really reliable arms, especially with so many of these unproven ones in their rotation to get them started. So, yeah, kind of expected to see them step back. It still felt like a bit of an upset, though, in my gut when you see one team that has historically trended as a question mark, those Jays, right, going up against a team that, came out to such a hot start last season, right? You almost wondered if they were just going to prove everybody wrong and barrel through the Jays, and that just didn't happen. So, hey, expected to an extent from us, ha to the pundits. But for all we know, the Rays are going to turn it around, win the next 2 games in this series, and move on in their schedule and start dominating. So let's hope we're more right than they are for a little while.
Yeah, I would say Yandy looks great. Home run in the first inning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he ended up
Mm-hmm.
with 3 hits on the night. He looked good, and your boy Caballero had a hit too, Warren.
Yeah, Scrappy Jose Caballero. I was a bit bummed to see him leave, though I was excited to get Luke Rayleigh for him. Caballero is somebody who's chippy. He's antagonistic. He works the count in the batter's box very effectively. We talked about how the Reds especially play into the meta of the larger stolen bases. Perhaps no single hitter in the entire league plays with the meta of the pitch clock as much as Jose Caballero. So he's going to frustrate a lot of teams out there and be a bit of a wild card in that lineup. I don't view him as a power source for that lineup, but I do view him as a decent contact guy at his best, and he can maybe help them win a few games. But he got caught stealing. I do remember that most assuredly from this previous game, and that's going to be the kind of mistakes he makes. So discipline will be important for him to use all those tools effectively to help those Rays win baseball games. But yeah, kudos to Caballero. I'm glad he gets to play a starting role for somebody out there because he was not our fit, ideally, for second base over in Seattle. Yeah, but some good games. Most definitely. I mean, I was rooting for Eflin to have a good day, especially as maybe the lone Iron Man left on that Rays starting rotation. But as he fell into the sixth, he just started giving up, hit after hit after hit. And to
Yep.
their credit, the Jays look like they're hungry and tooled up and prepared for this early season. We saw Vladdy hit a huge, huge home run to really signal his arrival for the season. And
Yeah,
you got
it
you
needs to
got
be.
yeah. Talk to me about the overall perception of the Jays for you coming out of that game.
Yeah, well, they are stacked as far as lineup is concerned. They have contact hitters, they have power hitters, they have on base guys, and it's been their biggest problem is the offense just turtling at the wrong time for so many years. And Vladdy and Bichette, in my mind, are right at the top of that. And Bichette
Mm-hmm.
managed to get 2 hits, and Vladdy managed to get a hit home run. So it's what they need to see on a consistent basis. Luckily, Springer made contact. Yeah, a lot of other guys, but yeah, it's
Well,
it's
little X factor here. Little X factor. Kevin Biggio hitting a home run for the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, if you're getting production out of that part of your lineup, the ninth hole hitter in this case, then you're playing with some house money, especially on opening day. that was maybe the most encouraging thing we saw come out of the Jays offense for the potential longevity of their offensive season. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the guys starting off on the right foot, guys who have had cold years recently, and it's time for a rebound. It looks like they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, we're gonna maybe barrel into a couple more surprises from opening day. I know one of the teams we both should be a little bit more excited about because of their, projected arrival to the desert in the coming years, those Oakland Athletics. Well, they faced some, backlash from the fan base right there on opening day. Talk to me about how that felt for you, seeing the Coliseum boycotted, essentially.
Yeah, huge parties happening in the parking lot, but as the game began, no one went inside. 15 minutes before first pitch, it was empty. It was a ghost town at the
Mm.
A's Coliseum. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's not surprising. The fans, they have to make their voice heard. They don't want their team to leave, and it's worse that their team is saying that they're leaving, but they're going to stick around in town for up to another 4 years. So it's
Mhm.
brutal. They think that there's still hope, and frankly, there is still hope of the team somehow, man, finding a way to stay. And they're going to make their voice heard. And it's a shame for the baseball team. It's a shame for the players who already understand the whole situation. Imagine walking out there, Warren, on opening day in your own home opener, and the fans aren't there. Brutal, absolutely brutal. It's
Yeah.
sad to see. And of course, Oakland ended up not even putting up a single run on the board on the day.
I read a lot of sports articles, part for research and part for fun. I just find sports writing so fascinating. And I notice that when you talk about opening day in NFL or you talk about this tip off of the season in NBA, there isn't quite the same potential for the morose, the macabre, the desolate feelings that baseball creates because of, I don't know, is it the more methodical pace? Is it the longer season and therefore the potential for more history? Is there like the fact that it is the first and greatest of America's sports when it comes to the history already compiled? There's a lot of emotion that goes into opening day, both in peaks and in valleys. And I was reading the article of a writer who lost their dad since the end of the previous season and how much they felt like it was heartbreaking to not have that end of game breakdown conversation with their father, right? From this specific opening day, their first without them. And I feel that in my heart about this Oakland fan base. I feel it in my heart that they're all in mourning. My heart goes out to a city already, borderline crumbling as a, metropolis kind of reputation in the country. Like you see when sports teams leave, you see a stock go down. And Oakland's sadly just been descending for about really arguably a decade. They lose the Chargers. No, they don't. They lose the Raiders. They lose the Warriors, who go over to San Francisco. They are just a little bit broken in so many ways. And I feel you in my heart, Oakland. I really do. As the city that's getting ready to welcome the Athletics and try to build a culture around them to an extent, like, I can only imagine how painful this is. I can only imagine how much you wish there would be a change out of left field, no pun intended. And I wish you only as much happiness as you can find from this. And come to Vegas, and we'll try to treat you well while you try to support your team for those that are clinging to it. So, yeah, I'm with you, man. Heartbreaking. It really is. This is a very emotional sport to an extent, and this is a valley in that morale that I know this franchise will take decades maybe to rebound from. So, the beginning of a real sad end. Let's get back to the fun. Baseball, everyone. How about some more surprises? Detroit plays so tightly with the Chicago White Sox, or is it the other way around? I mean, we all maybe thought the White Sox were going to come in looking like a team that didn't care about winning, but Garrett Crochet, I think, is the name of that young ace who debuted for the team, took the opening day ball, and proceeded to throw, I believe, 6 scoreless innings in a very compelling sign for the White Sox future. Now, none of us are thinking this is a team that's going to surprise us yet, because their offense really didn't do a thing. Literally, the game went to Detroit 1-0. But I think one of the surprises that we have to acknowledge is Javier Baez is still a focal point of this lineup, huh? Go ahead. I know you have something to say.
Dude, Javi Baez was a Met for like 5 minutes, and I can't stand the guy. He rotten culture follows this guy around, and we saw it when he was on the team, or as brief as it was. And I've kind of
Hmm.
seen it stinking in Detroit. And this dude was being booed in Chicago on opening day. And so after he gets a ball at the end of an inning, going in between, he rifles a ball at the netting, Warren, towards the fans that are booing him, which is like just such a shitty thing to do. I don't care where you are. Come on, man. That's so
Yeah,
small. Disappointing.
exactly. I was going to use the same word. It's just petty. It's
Yeah.
Anthony Rendon jabberjawing with the fans in Los Angeles. It's
Mhm.
Jesse Winker being Jesse Winker. It's just petty stuff. Like, we get it, man. You're the multi-million dollar arguable face of the franchise still, despite doing nothing over the last couple of years with this Tigers team to really earn that respect. Why are you lowering yourself to be throwing balls in the direction of fans just to get a reaction, just to feel like you're one up on them? Like, come on, man, you don't need to do that. And it's just sinking the respect level that has already dwindled so far for you. Like on day one. On day one. Remember last year, it was pretty early in the season that Javier Baez was making bad base running decisions, real
Yeah.
spontaneous swinging choices, and you see the highlight of the general manager getting kind of fed up and pulling him into the dugout and sending him to the showers, and
Yeah.
seeing it kind of shake him up and give him a better attitude for at least a little while for that Tigers team. And I think he's going to need it again if he keeps on doing what he's doing. Can you see any team being excited to sign this guy when his contract is up, for example?
Maybe he can fit with Tim in Miami. I don't know, man. I mean,
Mm,
Detroit has kids on this team on the opening day roster, and Cole Keith and Torkelson, and this is not the example that the team needs this guy to be setting for these other kids, And
totally.
listen, Javi got a hit. He stole a base. He can still field. Like, he can play ball, but he just needs to be a better example for everybody.
Despite being the player to cross the plate and give the game its one run that allowed Detroit to walk away with a win in game
Yeah.
one, I feel like we agree that Baez is a potential pitfall for the Detroit Tigers in more ways than one. And man, check your attitude. Check your attitude like you try to check your swings, okay? Because it's just not the, recipe for the long-term respect that you really should be grateful to have at this stage of your career and everything you've done. So quit
Yeah.
shooting on your own legacy, man. You're a what, right? Isn't he a 2016 World Series champion with those Chicago
Yep.
Cubs? So like be grateful to them, man. They're your whole legacy. Don't throw baseballs in their face. And I hope he sees this, and he'll be one of our 24 views to this
We
point.
know we know he's watching. We know you are.
Yeah, man. You got nothing else better to do since you're not caring about your baseball as much. Okay, fine. Those were maybe big surprises. Those were maybe big outcomes, but there's a couple that I think surprised me even more to a certain extent. We'll circle back to St. Louis giving up a drubbing to the Los Angeles Dodgers at home, and the really fascinating divisional rivalry between the Giants and the Padres, resulting in the Padres coming out on top in what I think was like a 3-6 swing. What I'm surprised by is these two teams that just came off of a week off, which is kind of something that usually maybe makes a difference in, say, October, come out looking so good, so prepared, and so fluid, and winning their baseball games pretty handily. Is that a surprise to you that the Padres and Dodgers look that good after a week-long layoff? I mean, if we're paying attention to October baseball, we probably should be a little surprised.
I was a little surprised. The Padres bats were still swinging like they were in that second game in Seoul.
Hmm.
Darvish came out and he looked as good, if not honestly better than he did in his first start. So, and you could say the
Hmm.
same for Glasnow on the Dodgers side of things, who's and another team where the bats were still swinging. So yeah, they seem like they stayed fresh, and I'm sure it was a question mark how they were, what was going to be hanging over them coming out of the Seoul series and that long hangover. But no, it looks like these are two teams that got an earlier start to the season than the others because they took advantage and both got wins on opening day.
And they sure did. And convincingly, handedly, appealingly. Those Giants were I mean, I'm kind of rooting against them at this point for all of the talking we've done about the mismanagement of guys like Brandon Crawford and most recently, of course, JD Davis. But they still were among your selections for wildcard teams. How
Yep.
much are you rooting for the Giants to rebound tonight when they take the field against the Padres in game 2?
Yeah, they have to. I mean, the offense was there for the Giants, and that's exciting to see. Some action on the bases too is always good. This guy Lee, I'm gonna butcher the name, but it's
Mm.
Yunho Lee,
Hmm.
already making an impact, Warren. I'm very excited for what impact he might have as the year goes on. But a little bit concerning that Logan Webb wasn't quite as shining for what we described as as a uh,
A
a
ground
starting
ball machine.
rotation. Absolutely, yes. And a rotation that really is behind Logan Webb. They need him to be a sure thing win for his starts. So it'll be a challenge to win the other 4 games until he gets another chance to start.
Hmm. Agreed. True. And agreed on Hoon Lee. I mean, he's probably the face of the Giants next several years, right? This is a
Yeah.
player that some are bold enough to suggest could be National League MVP. I'm just saying, or
Wow.
even Rookie of the Year.
Or
Um,
both.
yeah, maybe I should have flipped the order so that MVP had more gravitas. But I have seen a couple articles where people are thinking this guy could be someone who can play defense and, well, make contact enough to really do a lot for the Giants. And well, maybe they'll gel. Of course, there's some pieces on this team who are super compelling. We've talked about it in circles. It's just gonna have to see if first they can get over the Padres in game 2. I'm excited for it. But yeah, good points all around. I wonder if there's any other surprises that really jump out to me. I will say for me, I know we can talk about one matchup that was quite compelling, maybe the best game of the entire day. But I wonder if we want to save that as we start looking at whose, well, stock has fallen and whose stock has risen. You might say sinkers and risers a little bit from our predictions. Already, I've confessed that I was dumb about Royce Lewis. I was a little silly to think Chicago was such a strong lock for that division after what they faced already. And I'm sure some of your predictions, if you'd like to be humble for a minute, took a shot in the nose here or there. But maybe for this segment, let's talk about, well, who's sinking and who's rising based off of yesterday's outcomes. Shall we?
Yeah, man, let's do it. I mean, it's only opening day, but we have already established, like you said, where we kind of stood on everybody. And yeah, we're right about some things, we're right about some other things. Let's see where we stand. I think we could both probably come up with 3, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And I'm going to let you break down your first riser as I make my split time decision here on who really jumped out at me. So take it away, my friend. Give me your first riser.
For sure, man. So for me, I was really impressed by the Pirates yesterday.
Uh huh.
Um, I'll be honest, I didn't tune in for the start of the game. I saw them trailing and they were able to come back and tie it against the Marlins and send it into extras. And you know what? These are the types of games that the Pirates need to win.
Mm
I
hmm.
definitely hoped for the best, but was not very high on how much the Pirates would really be able to compete when it came to pitching battles.
Mm
And they did
hmm.
great, Warren. They're on the move up for me. I don't necessarily have them as the basement already in that division.
Sure. And I'm glad that they had a good first day. I mean, some of the names that that need to be whom they're going to be for the Pirates to succeed succeeded. So you look at Brian Reynolds hit a 2-run homer relatively early in the game, announcing himself as still a pretty key piece to this Pittsburgh lineup. But I suppose O'Neill Cruz, who I voted as the least likely to win home run derby, but will. kind of name. He hit his first homer too, and he messed around as he did it. Like that
Mm-hmm.
swing was not clean contact. This guy's clearly dealing with some massive power, and that thing flew straight out of left field, all pretty like. However, if I'm going to be perfectly frank with you, Dan, my first riser is the team they beat. I did not
Mm.
have a whole lot of faith or stock or understanding of why we should be even thinking about the Miami Marlins as this season got started, but yesterday's game showed me how many pieces they have that really are ready to contribute. Let's start with the elephant on the lineup. That's going to be Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson did not have a bad day.
Nope.
He actually picked up a hit and an RBI, and even though he struck out, like he didn't make anybody mad or give anyone the perception that he's out there to throw the game, as some of the reputations had declined to in Chicago. And so I'm excited to see that happen. I also want to give like 3 cheers for the defense I saw from Jake Berger, coming up with some big plays at the hot corner to keep that game as close as humanly possible, as long as humanly possible. It's a big guy with a big bat. So it's cool to see the defense not losing a step there for a guy who I think might be more underrated than I realized. And then let's just point out that Jazz Chisholm Jr. is still Jazz Chisholm Jr. He might be the best version of him yet. He's had a great spring training, and he marches into this season ready to really make an impact. And he took 2 walks, showing that discipline that I think is going to be super important and is super important for any key lineup star. And he also picked up a big hit and scored 2 runs himself. I mean, those runs really made a big difference, especially earlier on in the game. So, other impact players, I mean, 2 hits for Josh Bell. Brian De La Cruz picked one up. Like, the offense and the pieces that need to be good look good. So,
And
I
all of that, sorry, Warren, all of that, and Luis went 0 for 6.
exactly. I was building up to that as one of
Oh, sorry.
your preseason predictions that you
Yeah, I
can
did,
humbly poke some holes into to get you started, but
dude.
you and I both know how much faith the entire league and has in Luis Arias and how much respect the pitching staffs across the league have for him. So, for him to start that way, fine. But I bet it's not going to last. If I'm being honest, I'm sure he'll bounce back.
I'm sure he will, but it definitely pokes a hole in my bet for him to win a batting title because that's not how you want to start the year. I mean, who knows? He could easily go for 6 for 6 tomorrow. Who knows?
And he can. And I bet he will have a couple really impressive, borderline, you might say, flawless games at some point. So don't worry about it. Remember, 1 game. It's a marathon. We got lots left. Who's another riser for you, man?
Dude, for me, it's the Blue Jays. I was really impressed by their offense in that game. The pitching held it down pretty well, and they actually won that game with less hits than the Rays had. So
Mm-hmm.
just an impressive game all around. I was very happy with them, and their stock is rising. I had them as a wild card team, but they were definitely borderline with Seattle. For me, they showed me
Mm-hmm.
everything I expect to see. And this is Justin Turner only. Justin Turner didn't even manage to get a hit in this game in the DH position for them. He's going to be important in that role, and hopefully he can keep it and knock a few hits. But even with him being relatively quiet, this team performed very well.
And I have to agree with you because the Jays looked awesome offensively. They looked really calm and poised, and they look great.
Well, Warren, since my other risers are really because of exploding offenses, let's just round it out with the last
Mm-hmm.
one. My third riser is going to be Arizona. And we already were pretty high on them, Warren, but they're a riser for me because their offense came out swinging. Just
Mm-hmm.
in the 3rd inning alone, Warren, we saw this team explode for single and single and double and triple and single and just what you want to see without a home run. They didn't need it. And we saw Zach Gallen pitch an absolute gem on the under end of things. It's the Snakes for
Mm-hmm.
me, Warren. They're rising.
Oh, they're dangerous as all get out, man. And I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I'm not sure I like all of the snakes you guys keep saying. I don't think it's as common of a secondary nickname as you are behaving like. And I don't know. I want to call them
Probably
like the.
not.
I'm looking for a Harry Potter mashup and be like the Arizona Ashwinders. Or maybe we can do the Sidewinders sound good. I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I find just snakes to evoke to me that they could just be like a garden snake. I don't fear that. The Arizona Rattlers, like, we gotta find something more imposing. But anyway, fine. The Diamondbacks have every right to strike fear into everybody. That's my problem here. I just want to find something scary to call them after what we saw last night. Good vibes from Eugenio Suarez are going to fit so good into
Yeah.
a lineup like this where they should have good vibes. Massively good vibes. It's extremely exciting to watch what they did yesterday because the Los Angeles Dodgers winning the division doesn't look like so much of a foregone conclusion. And you take into account the sheer, like, density of pitching battles we're going to see out of this division. Like,
Mhm.
this might be the most compelling baseball division in about a decade, in my mind. But I'm just saying that because I feel it in my heart. I'm so excited. Good choice. They definitely deserve to be a riser. Let me just spit out my last two for fun. I'm going to go with first the team that I did pick to come out of the American League Central, and that's the Cleveland Guardians. So I alluded to it earlier. Stephen Vogt got his first win as a general manager. That's great stuff to see because not every general manager on their rookie stint did get one, right? Mets.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and sorry, was that a little bit too much, Spice?
Only if we were the only ones, which I don't think we were. But okay, Warren, I see you. Okay.
Hey, we got to throw barbs and jives. We can't be friends all the time, but hopefully most of the time. Anyway, the Cleveland Guardians whooped that butt and completely shut out a team. Yes, I know. The Athletics are also basement dwellers in our understanding and predictions. But, if the Snakes can get one over the Rockies and become a heater, then I'm going to do the same for those Guardians who got what they needed from Jose Ramirez. They got what they needed from several other pieces and just looked really strong, stable, and offensively capable. And that's what they're going to be to take advantage of what we've already discussed over and over again to be an extremely injury prone, and wide open American League Central. So, Cleveland announced themselves as offensively more prepared in this game than I think most of us would have thought. And that's exciting because they already have a great pitcher. I mean, did you see what mm,
Bieber.
exactly? I'm like, I was getting him crossed with Brady Singer of the Royals in my brain, so thank you. Did you see what Bieber did? He did plenty.
Dude.
He
Be-
owned him.
Be- Bieber did great, and the bullpen was perfect behind him too, which is what
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland needs. So it kind of everything went well for them. And yeah, you're right; it was against Oakland, but you still got to go out there and play. And Oakland still got 4 hits out of it. So yeah, great game all around for Cleveland. I get you, Warren. I see that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but the guy that really caught my eye is this one guy named David Fry. David
Mm,
Fry picks up, just messing around, 3 hits, 2 RBI, no, excuse me, an RBI and 2 runs, and that
he had a
was
day.
right in the middle of the lineup. Pretty important piece to see pop off, especially when neither you or I had him on our minds at all when we were breaking down the division. I love seeing stories like that. And with that in mind, my last riser is the Cincinnati Reds. Another
Ah,
team that had, basically been dismissed by us as a stable suggestion to win the National League Central, maybe scratch out a wild card, but neither of us committed when all was said and done. And the Cincinnati Reds made us look a little foolish with how well they adapted to their early injuries and suspensions and put on another offensive show. We saw so many stolen bases. I think Ellie got 2 to third base alone, and I'll look up some more. But the offense was popping off, and just like David Fry, it was Nick Martini who really caught my eye, whacking 2 home run balls out of right field for those Cincinnati Reds. And he's a 33-year-old, well, described to be journeyman, right? He's only played about 140 games, I believe I read, in the majors. And at age 33, it's a cool story to see him make such a huge impact on opening day. And I think those Reds did pick up another former Mariner who kind of kept our designated hitter position afloat last year, Mike Ford. I need to remind myself if he landed on their 40-man roster to come out of the year, but that's another bopper they've got in their back pocket, ready to come in and smack some balls around like Martini did in game 1 if they need it. I know. I make everything about Seattle. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm I've got a lot of faith in these Reds teams with how they handled game 1. What do you think?
I think you're right, dude. Could you remind me? I don't remember. During our breakdown, were you on the fence about Frankie Montas? Because I remember being pretty high on Frankie Montas.
So,
And no,
go
go ahead.
ahead. I'm going to say that Frankie Montas, formerly a fantastic standout pitcher for the Oakland Athletics,
Mhm.
was brought in to be the fresh ace in a way. I mean, obviously he opened game 1. That's the biggest story of this is how great he looked. Great American Ballpark. Frankie Montas, dare we say, could be back. Like in a big way. And that can be nothing but music to the ears of Cincinnati Reds fans, because if he can give them a win every 5 days, the confidence is going to start to surge here on the pitching side, where they're already super confident offensively and you can feel it from them. Big statement made by Montas yesterday. But give us your take.
Oh, I'm with you, dude. Montas really led the way for them, and the offense produced the way that it needed to. You hit a lot of good points in there, Martini. Glad to see him doing well. I will
Mm-hmm.
say, Ellie got an error yesterday. Don't like to see that so early on. Not a huge deal, but it's a hot position him at shortstop that you want to see continued growth from him. And there was a couple instances of that last year, especially in the second half. Not super excited to see that on opening day. But he managed to get a hit and a couple of runs, so still a good day for him. And overall, yeah, this is a week with Nationals team that the Reds, I think, should expect to go in and beat, and they did. So let's see if they can finish up the series strong. But definitely better off than where we thought they'd be when we last talked about them, Warren. I get it.
The team is stacked. I mean, I look at them feeling like, Jonathan India was a rookie of the year for the National League just a few short seasons ago. And while his stock has gone down in Cincinnati because he's not the offensive impact player that maybe some expected, the thing is he's still an above average piece of this lineup, and he's one of so many. Will Benson, Encarnacion Strand, Jay Mercandelario, one of the more genius signings, especially with the injuries they're facing. I've talked about how Jake Fraley could be important to them, and he had 2 hits and scored 2 runs yesterday. And I think I'm getting higher and higher on Spencer Steer. I mean, I'm super grateful he's on my fantasy team. He's one of those, utility men who can do it all and is a bit of a Swiss Army knife, and he's perfect for a Cincinnati team that may ask a ton of different roles from their players while they cover some of these losses. So if the team can play as fluid as they looked yesterday, and not let mistakes like Ellie's errors get in the way, I mean, there's a lot more upside to Ellie than there is downside. So I would think this Reds team is super excited about game 1 outcome and ready to ride that momentum. But everything can't be trending upwards, right? The sinkers need some time to sink. Let's end our coverage today to look at the teams that, well, maybe aren't living up to expectations already. Dan, who are your sinkers for our opening day reactions?
Well, I'll give them to you quick, Warren, because it's kind of disappointing, and it's a similar story for all of them. First, it's the
Mm-hmm.
Rays. We were not expecting them to be quite as strong as they were last year, but quite frankly, they seem worse on both sides of the ball. Phil
Yeah.
Maton, kind of the only saving grace there. Uh, we'll see how they can manage to recover, and hopefully they'll do a little better. But they look to be struggling a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll also go with the Astros, who also struggled on the pitching side of the ball. I mean, they had a good number of hits, but kind of early on, and they didn't really do a lot in the second half of the game, and that cost them. So kind of disappointed to see. They're certainly wanting to establish themselves as the leader of that division, and it looks like they're off to a rough start. They're trending down for me big time. And then, Warren, I'm sorry, it's got to be the Mariners, dude. I asked you one thing in our predictions pod, but I told you I need the Mariners to sweep Boston. We just talked about all of my other predictions busting already, Warren. This is like March Madness. This is like my March Madness bracket so far, dude. I needed the Mariners to get a win. The sweep is off. What happened?
Oh, March Madness. I heard that. That was funny. I didn't know you had some Texas twang to you. But, okay. I'll go ahead and not dodge the bullet. I deserve to eat it with my teeth. So, first of all, one of my sinkers is the Mets. And I feel like...
Oh, okay. I see how it is.
I feel like both teams had similar issues. Let's just put it out there. First of all, I'm going to say I love Luis Castillo, and I totally understand why he got the ball on game one. But I'm not shocked he had control issues. When I watch him, there are times when, yes, it seems impossible that he pulls off what he pulls off with the ball. And sometimes he has rough periods with that being the same case, right? His control was a problem. He gave up, I believe, 4 runs out of the 6, which, I'll drip a tear, but I'm not shocked. Perhaps that he had the control issues he had, and he will recover because he does run hot and cold in that way. Next time we see him take the mound, I expect a more stable Castillo. But offensively, I will point out that batter by batter, we generally just didn't have good pitch selection. There was, and that's certainly a symptom of 2023 carrying over. I can feel my team's nerves, okay? I am somebody, as a human being, guys, who lives in his head, who overanalyzes everything, and who makes everything a little bit more important than it probably is. Take ourselves a bit too seriously. Now, after ending spring training on a bit of an upswing, I can imagine a lot of our hitters, especially the veterans. We saw J.P. Crawford struggle. We saw Ty France struggle. We saw Cal struggle. Cal Raleigh, guys. Well, they are especially invested in proving Seattle is a much better team this year. So I'm not surprised that they had what I might call the Soul Series Game 1 jitters. And really just not making solid selections with the baseball. But let's also point out which parts were objectively bad. Dom Canzone. I love this kid. Very much an X factor for the long-term expectancy of success in Seattle, for me anyway, especially for this season. Dom Canzone is not great defensively. It's already documented, and while he has taken steps forward this spring, he didn't make some sharp and urgent decisions yesterday that could have really helped us, most notably attacking a ball that was knocked off of the left field wall. Instead of running up to it aggressively, he assumed it would bounce back at him, and that moment of hesitation probably cost us a run. Also defensively, Luis Urias and Josh Rojas both took turns at third base, where last year, of course, you'll remember we had the glowing example of should have been Gold Glove winning third base play in Eugenio Suarez. Now with those Diamondbacks making similarly sick plays, I was disappointed to notice. But anyway, Luis and Rojas, they did not do well defensively, each committing an error, each, I believe at least in the case of Josh Rojas, costing us a run. So mistakes were made. They were a little bit jittery, right? Things happen. I was just as bummed as I'm sure you want me to be, just as heartbroken, but it's okay. Game 2, George Kirby's on the mound, and I'm a lot less stressed because that guy is your pick to be the American League Cy Young winner, and I'm looking for one of your predictions to go well today for us.
It would be the only one, so I'm sorry in advance for the jinx, Warren.
Oh, wah, wah. I'm not worried about it. I have a feeling you're not jinxing us. I just have a lot better feeling in my bones about today than I did yesterday.
Okay.
and we'll see what happens. Okay, I guess my sinkers need to be kind of reviewed quickly because we don't want to grind too much out of our maiden voyage here in opening day. I'm going to go ahead and point out the Cubs. Obviously, need to take a nosedive here because they were my divisional winner. The Justin Steele is going to miss at least 6 to 18 weeks. That's a lot of in the middle. So we're hoping it's on the shorter end for those of us who believe in Chicago. And really, do I need to say more? I think we're going to learn a lot about how well they might rebound when we see Imanaga pitch for the first time. And if he does well, perhaps we don't lose so much confidence after all. But if not, then, the ice is really thin for this team. So we'll see what happens. As we move forward, my second team that's riding the low, actually my third, since I hinted the Mets. I'll just finish what I was saying about the Mets. You guys also looked like you were pitched or, choosing the wrong pitches. You guys also looked like you just didn't quite feel so invested in your opportunities at the plate. I think this was a team that kind of walked out with an L mentality today, and it just kind of played out that way. But here's a curveball for you. While you and I have been talking, the Phillies and the Atlanta Braves have continued their first game of the season, and what began as a compelling two-run homer and therefore a lead from Brandon Marsh. Let's try that again. What began as a compelling lead for the Phillies due to Brandon Marsh, one of my favorite players on that lineup, hitting his first homer of the year for two, became a drubbing of its own as the Phillies need to take a step back from expectation, getting put in their place by the Atlanta Braves in game one. Atlanta just put up 9 on them, real fast. Like, it went from being competitive for the Phillies to being a whooping. So let's just leave it at that. Those Phillies who are supposed to be poised and hungry and angry and have that chip on their shoulder, well, they just ate the chip today, and now we'll have to
choked
see.
On
it. Yeah, the Phillies choked, and tomorrow they're going to need to get back to playing better baseball. We'll see what happens. But that's it, man. Those sinkers have sunk. The risers are flying high. Which teams keep momentum? Which teams will fall off the bandwagons that we've put them on? I'm sure it will go a lot of different ways. Baseball's finally back, and that's all that matters today.
We'll check in maybe next week and see if there's any other teams trending up or trending down, right, Warren? Any other sinkers and risers? But
yeah, we'll definitely hope that there's some variety there for sure. I don't want it to always be our teams that we're shooting barbs at each other.
Yeah, little personal, but that's okay. There's a couple other things, just things I wanted to touch on really quick, Warren. Just wanted to mention, because we did previously when we talked about the Soul series, Teoscar Hernandez taking more at bats. We're going to keep an eye on him all year, Warren. And so, yes, I know you've been watching. In that game yesterday, Teoscar Hernandez got a hit. He also struck out 3 times. So I know you're wondering. Let me load it up right here. That's 7, Warren, through 3 games, 7 strikeouts for Teoscar Hernandez. A 167 batting average, 286 on base.
Oh, interesting. I saw the double, and I was telling Tiffany the entire time I was watching him run the bases, fire truck Teoscar Hernandez. I don't know why I'm being that harsh to the guy. He had only 1 year of disappointing me, and I'm probably just playing it up for the camera.
Because he's a Dodger.
But he is a Doyer. So I do want to say that he is on the right lineup to cover for the downs, but he might have a historic number of strikeouts. I think our friend Dylan Rodriguez projected that could be a big part of his history with the Dodgers this year. And maybe I will watch it and smile to myself if it comes true. But I do know if he was still with that Seattle Mariner club, like, there would be a bigger spotlight on his challenges. But when you're playing for the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have the MV3 in Major League Baseball, right? You can afford to have a Teoscar Hernandez. And hey, turn around if you can, bud. But if you can't, just be grateful you've got all these other players around you making you look good, helping to salvage a clunker. Other storylines around the league. Will the Mets and Mariners rebound? These hosts certainly hope so. Will the drama between the Mets and the Brew Crew boil over? We saw that risky slide from Hoskins almost taking out McNeil, and tempers flare already in game one for those two teams. Will there be more examples from them or any other teams around the league? Do we really have to get hot already, guys? Come on now. Will the Giants sneak one out against the Padres and make this disagreement between Dan and I a little bit more interesting? I've got the Padres going to the playoffs, and I know Dan's sticking to the Giants, but it's an early, lack of excitement for San Francisco. Some cool tests are coming up right after these series. We'll get to talk about some very exciting matchups. New York Yankees will face Arizona. The Blue Jays will take on Houston in an extremely important early test for those clubs. I know you've got that one really excited for. We've got the Royals taking on the Baltimore Orioles at home. We didn't even talk about Corbin Burns striking out 11, the most by an Orioles pitcher since 1998 when Mike Messina did it, I think is the stat I read.
But not Mike Trout.
Trout. We didn't even take a trip around the bases on him, but Mike Trout was the only Angel who did really anything, as is expected. Anyway,
sound familiar? Pre 2018 Los Angeles.
Cleveland and Minnesota is going to be a really fascinating series to see where those two teams truly do stack out in this division. And Houston and Texas is on the horizon, not too long into the future, but as is that Arizona team going up against the Braves. All that in this upcoming week, it would seem. So we'll break down those exciting series, some more patterns around baseball. Dan, I call these bases covered. Don't you?
We covered the bases, dude. Great opening day. Next week, we'll have a full week's worth of games to break down.
Throw it down in the comments if you think Mike Trout will be the only Angel to do anything of merit this year like the rest of us do. Tell us down in the comments which game in opening day you had your eye on and enjoyed the most. Tell us down in the comments which injury impacted you in your heart the most, as you will hope your team rebounds from a little bit of pain and discomfort. And finally, tell us in the comments if you have any emotional ties to baseball like I think everybody in our room does. I have fond memories of my dad, and everybody gets older. It's a hard phase for me. What about you guys? What baseball memories tug at your heartstrings? I'd be really excited to know. Leave us some news in the comments. And most of all, thank you for listening. It's an honor to talk baseball for and with you all. And we'll see you guys next week when we take another trip around the bases.